Welcome back. Welcome back to How Black is Black. We have been away for a little bit because we have really been trying to rest. And we are so glad to be back. Chéree has been unusually quiet in welcoming folks. So, Chéree, say hi to everybody. Welcome them.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone.
For those of you that are new to our podcast, we are Merkeb and Chéree. We use she, her pronouns. We are co executive directors of the Michigan Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence. We are a Michigan based organization, and we have a membership of about 75 programs throughout our state that support survivors every day and every moment, survivors of domestic violence, sexual violence, and human trafficking. We are excited to share our thoughts and ideas and our friendly banter with you on different topics. And this week, we're going to talk about rest, community, and self care, and what it means for us. Um, I'm going to say my evolution of understanding of what it means, not just what it means, but how to practice these things, and still the struggles that I face. And Cherie might have a different thing to share this week.
Yeah, I like the topic of, talking about rest and self-care and how we engage with those things. And, far too often, as you use the word evolution, I would say I've evolved over time too in my understanding of what self-care is, what self-care can be, and how important it actually is to engage in it and recognizing for myself that self-care itself just does not mean like going off into an isolation chamber, or that if I'm taking care of myself that I'm being neglectful of other things in some sort of
Mm,
way, or that I've worked myself into exhaustion and now I've just reached a point where I'm deserving of self-care. But recognizing that self-care is something that I am entitled to, and I use that word intentionally, because oftentimes when we think about entitlement, we talk about entitlement not always in the best of lights, but there are things that we are definitely entitled to. And we are entitled to live in a space where caring for ourselves is just a thing that we can do and should do.
just cause, just
Just
because.
because,
Yeah, this is
you
hard.
wake up and you
Yeah,
deserve to care for yourself.
yeah. And I mean, I go way back in the Wayback Machine, Cherie, like to my childhood, right?
Mhm.
And thinking about the way self care was demonstrated to me, right? By the people in my life, whom I love and respect. But there were a few consistent messages that I received growing up. So, first, like you, I, I, I don't think it was ever demonstrated to me that self care is something that is an individual thing. Self care was always in the framing of a community
Mhm.
sort of setting for me. So that I recall very specifically, right? And it took place in the form of like celebrations, not even just specific celebrations, but coming together. Like I remember my grandmother had this um, like a grassroots savings group. I don't know how else to translate it to English, but they met monthly. But the intention was to save money, yes, but also in that setting, they supported one another. Um, they processed, for lack of better word, like a today word would be processing. They understood in each other's trials and tribulations and offered advice and care, right? They would also maybe braid hair or, take care of their skin or hair during those meetings. So I recall seeing that, but outside of that space, anything that was an attempt to like take care of yourself while quote unquote neglecting others was really frowned upon, as though
Mhm.
like how be humble, sort of like be modest, right? Be
Yeah.
and you shouldn't take the time for yourselves every day. It should be on these marked days where you care for self. So even being able to say like, hey, I'm tired about, because I've had a long day and I'm not going to, engage with my family, and I'm going to engage in some self-care. I can't imagine that way back in the way days that that would be anything that anybody in my circles could say.
No, I'm with you. As you were speaking, I had an actual visual of my grandma working from can't see morning to can't see night
Yeah.
and caring for so many people in between the time, and that being an expectation
Yeah.
that she did that. And it wasn't until way later in her life, like close to end of life, um, that even the concept of her caring for herself even came close to being verbalized, you know?
Right. Right.
And it was very interesting, to see this evolution of someone who you've always known as a caregiver and a caretaker of others, and someone who was always pouring into doing for and never really seeing it being a thing that they were allowed to do for themselves
Yeah.
or celebrated if they tried to do something for themselves, right?
Mhm.
Not being seen as selfish,
Yeah.
right?
Yes,
And that's a
exactly.
hard thing,
Yeah.
when you're trying to explain to someone that I deserve to care for me simply because I'm me,
Yeah.
right? No other reason. But that is enough. Full stop. Like how we say no is a full sentence. I
Mhm.
deserve to care for myself doesn't require explanation. Yet we find ourselves every single time with people looking for a reason or an
Exactly.
explanation for you engaging and caring for yourselves.
Mm.
And I forget who said it. I think it was Audre Lorde, maybe, who talked about
Mhm.
self care as an act of resistance. I think that's who it
Mhm.
was.
Mhm. It is.
And every time I read that quote, I think about how super powerful that is, especially to say it out loud. Because if you don't stop and take the time for that, something's going to give in some kind of way.
Yeah.
And not in a way that's going to be beneficial to you as a whole human, as a whole person who is experiencing all of the different ways in which you can experience this life, particularly in these times. You started out today talking about the fact that, we've been off for a while. And when I think about how long it's been, because it's been 10 months,
Mm.
I think about the number of things that have transpired over that amount of time and the fact that our bandwidth and our ability to be present in certain circumstances only extends so far. And when it doesn't stretch as far as others would like it to go, we have to give ourselves permission to be okay with that, to
Yeah.
be okay with saying, this is as far as I can go right here, right now, and I have to rest.
Yeah.
I have to rejuvenate for myself. I have to be in community with people who get and understand me and who share some of the same beliefs that I do. Because part of self care is also finding those safe spaces.
Mhm.
And there aren't a lot of those, if we're like honest.
No.
There's just not a lot about them. I mean, even when we talk about the work that we do, we talk about safer spaces, right? Not a safe space, but safer spaces. But when we talk about being in community and finding rest and engaging in self care, in order for you to really do that, there has to be a sense of safety as well.
Yeah. Which is, to be honest, really hard, especially now to find with the landscape that we're in and the work that we do. I mean, it was hard before, it's progressively harder now. Um, and you're right. Part of that care does look like, how do I find and make time for people with shared lived experiences, right? For people with respect and understanding of my position or myself as an individual, not just my role as a leader in this organization, but my role
Mhm.
as a parent to a black child right now, right? As a sister, as a mentor in community, right? And saying that that is part of what we have to intentionally seek and maintain, right? Because it's maintaining those spaces that is also equally hard. Finding them is hard, but when we find them, how do we maintain them, right? And make them a space that is um, supportive for everyone who engages in that space. And I tell you, some of earlier on in my career, there was no such thing as self care for me. I I saw it as a reward, right, for exhaustion.
Mhm.
So it was, if you work X over X or whatever, then I reward myself with something without thinking about what the impact that had on my health. And it had a pretty serious impact on my health earlier on in my community. And unfortunately, at the time, I also worked in an organization that didn't really promote the idea of self care. In theory, yes, we had some employment assistance things and things like that, but there was no mindfulness about, like, hey, your PTO bank is really, really high. Do you have a plan? Right. It was actually the opposite. It was this encouragement of, like, oh yes, you're salaried, you worked over 40. That's what we expect. That's the value that was put on there. So it was really hard to engage in an organization that was predominantly white, led by white leadership, to even have the conversation about isolation based on my lived experiences, on who I am outside of that role, that I couldn't find community. Finding community was really hard. I couldn't have that conversation because I never felt that that was a welcome conversation, or that people would understand. I don't think that they may have reacted negatively to it. I just don't think that they would have been able to support the conversation or make a way
Yeah.
for me, right, to address that feeling. um because I think at the root it goes back to the inability to bring our whole self to work.
Yeah, that really resonates. We unfortunately live in a very individualistic society, right? Every person for themselves. And generally speaking, we are a people of community.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm super grateful for us because we aren't in isolation. Even in a time period where isolation is happening, we have each other and we're not in that as isolated as we could be if we were
Mm,
just in this role singularly, right? And even as we look even across our nation in this field, there's only a handful of us, um, and handful of us being Black EDs who are leading coalitions and being able to be in space with one another and provide that support and that community allows us to have rest even in small increments, right,
yeah.
with each other, because it's a time period in which you can simply just say, you know what, today was hard. And the people that you're talking about actually get it. and
Yeah.
understand it without a whole lot of explanation needing to be attached to it. And when you are in particular places where the community of folk that are there don't have shared history, don't have shared identity, it takes a lot more out of you to try and share those things that are needed for you to engage in self care. And it still could go left misunderstood.
Yeah. Because it's so connected too, Cherie. Let's be real because yes, there's a reason there's only a handful of us in our country that run coalitions that serve proportionately more survivors who look like us and who have our identities. And
Mhm.
that's telling, right? That's probably the reason this podcast exists, right? It's telling of our work, and where we need to start moving towards. Um, the truth is that it never escapes me that on the best of days, there is still a lot of scrutiny, right? And our
Mhm.
work is under the microscope on the best of days. During the worst of days, it feels like, remember that high school biology class where you're like magnify times 7 and put the little
Yes.
petri dish under there? Yeah, that's exactly what it feels like I'm at a magnified times 100, to be able to say like, okay, look, you didn't guide your organization through this unprecedented time that nobody knows, a lot of how to do the work that we're all just going and learning and doing our best, right? To predict and to address issues as they come up. But I still feel there's a different set of expectations for us as leaders to be able to address the harm that is being experienced by so many survivors, which then for me feels like, well, how do I have time for that then, right? How do I have time for rest without going back in my mind to defaulting to the old times of like, okay, this has helped me survive. Why don't I just fall back? Meaning the you don't need rest, just plug through. Just get through it, right? Like at the end, you can rest. And it takes so much effort for my brain not to go back to that part of like ooh, this worked. Because in a way it worked to appease others, but it didn't work for me. But let me tell you,
Right.
sometimes, ooh, on those days, I'm like, "Ugh."
Well, I try not to throw out $100 word if it only costs $5, but I think
That's
we need a
right.
$100 word today.
Mhm.
And that $100 word is maladaptive,
That's right.
right? I mean, because it worked for that period of time as a survival method, right?
Yeah.
And so then we have to ask ourselves, where are we right now? And do we need to apply that same method today?
Mhm.
Right? And is it comfortable to go back to? Yeah, because we know it, it's familiar.
Yeah.
We did it. It seemed to work for us at the time. But I think you brought up a really good point earlier when you talked about the toll it actually took on your health.
Yeah.
Like other people didn't feel that toll. You probably did a really good job of masking and didn't allow people to actually see the toll that it was taking on you. And those are also some of those things that we do to protect ourselves too, is not letting people see that we're actually tired, that we're actually worn out, that we can use some help too. We as Black women often get called super women
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot, right?
Strength,
We're strong.
resilience, like name it. Yes,
Yeah,
it's the
right?
love-hate relationship words.
Yes, right? Because
Yes.
and the reason why there is such love-hate relationship to those words is because there's some truth to it, right? And also, it doesn't mean that we don't get tired, that we don't
Mhm.
need help, that we don't enjoy just being like everybody else. We don't want to have to show up or be expected to show up in every space as if our feelings don't matter,
Yeah.
right? As if we don't experience harm because we do, or that we have to somehow silence ourselves because people don't want to see all of our full range of emotions, including anger, even if we're rightfully angry in the moment. No one wants to see it. We get demonized for showing any type of anger or upsetness. And holding all of those things in are toxic.
Yeah.
They literally create harm in our bodies. And I was listening to this podcast the other day where this woman was talking about how, it feels like after you have gone through something really, really hard or tiring or traumatic, and you made it all the way through, and then you go sit down somewhere, and then now all of a sudden you're sick. You need to go to the hospital. You got a cold. All these aches and things are happening. And she talked about how, because our body has gotten the signal now that it can now deal with all of those things.
Mhm.
We want to get to a place where we aren't waiting until we are completely exhausted and downtrodden before we recognize that it's okay to just be in this moment. There isn't anything spectacular that we have to do in this moment. And part of that is recognizing that we aren't in it alone. Because when you feel like you have to carry it by yourself, you will carry it by yourself.
That's
At least
true.
try to.
That's true. Yeah. In everything, right? Like even outside of our workspace, right? Yeah, caring if we're caregivers in our family, if we're outside of, I know outside of work, I engage with other communities, right?
Yeah.
And do other volunteer work. And I'm a parent, and I'm a sister, and I'm a daughter, and I'm a friend, and I'm a biological sister, but a sister to sister, right? Non
Mhm.
biological people. So, um, I do think it is important that even outside of our workspace, that we remember we are not alone, and what does that look like? Because realistically, has to be realistic too. One of the things I really appreciate about you is that, and in our conversations, is that this is not like an advice column, right? We're not sharing these things to say that, hey, do it this way, because there's no one way, right?
Right.
And the prescribed self-care, from my point of view, is very much rooted in consumerism, capitalism, and targeted towards people that don't look like me and you. And
Mhm.
so that often doesn't bring me self care, right? The things, if you just Google self care, 110%, it will show you, drinking water and some yoga and candles, which is great. Um,
You're right, though. You're right, though.
Great for some, and I don't mind candles, and yoga's not my jam, but it's cool for some people, and drinking
Mhm.
water is important, right? But for me, it is engaging in those cultural practices that remind me of my value and worth, right? At a time where um, systems are telling me I'm not valuable or my worth is
Mhm.
really low, right? It is laughing with, and or the unspoken, right? For me,
Yeah.
the self-care is I could just call you up, for example, and say, girl, and then you'll know exactly what I mean. I don't you don't
That is
even
the
We don't
best.
even have to we don't even have to
It's one of
explain it,
my
right?
favorites. Yes.
Right, you get it. Like the unspoken, that is self-care. And um it's not shared with us in the common mainstream ways of, hey, that is self-care, right? Like
Yes.
braiding your hair, or sitting and
Oh, you should oil my
looking at
scalp too, because
images that look,
that's
oh
great
yes, oil,
self-care.
oh, I did that this weekend. Ooh, yes, I oiled my scalp this weekend. That was fantastic. Now I need someone else to do it, so I don't have to
Yeah,
put
that's
my hands on my
self-care. Yes.
yeah. Anybody have that business? Anybody have a scalp oiling business out there in Michigan? Please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Um, but yes, these things, right? Humor and finding laughter and funny things. And there's nowhere that I've found actually that says here, this is what the breadth of self care can look like for you without judgment, right? Or you don't have to have this brand name pair of shoes to engage in some walking or whatever. It's okay to not have any shoes on or whatever shoes you want to wear. It's just it breaking breaking away and sharing those messages has become equally important for me. So I don't continue to perpetuate those messages, right, for my child, but even now for my mother, right, who we have a
Yeah,
different relationship now to be able to unlearn those things together because that is part of it is that when there is support even within family and all of us can unlearn some of these things, then our journey, right, and our evolution of self care can continue. It just doesn't get to pause or stop.
I love that. I love that because part of the self care that I've been really intentional about is the food that I'm putting in my body,
Oh, yeah, that's a good
and
one.
I was thinking about early in life, there weren't a lot of options for what I was consuming just based off of our financial status.
Hmm.
The options were very limited. And so they weren't always the healthiest of options, right? And now being in a position where I get to choose what I'm going to eat and put in my body and choosing those things with intentionality and also sharing those things with my mom,
Hmm.
because that whole history of these are the particular type of foods that we ate without examining where that came from and
Yeah.
why we're still engaging in those things.
Hmm.
And should
Hmm.
we? Do we have to? What part of it is I'm engaging in this because this is just something that is important to me and what I want to do versus these are the things that I've done. I don't know why I've done them, but we're just doing them. And that was a really interesting conversation, especially as we start talking about what our health looks like right now, right? The kind of
Hmm.
medications that we're taking versus what we actually need to take, and things that we can do holistically for our bodies before a doctor is mandating that we have to do those
Mm.
things in order,
Yes.
to be
Yes.
okay. So that's
Yes.
been a really big part of my self care journey for myself is really examining my eating and my physical activity for my overall well being by choice.
Hmm. Yeah. Mine has been focused a lot on um, my mental health.
Hmm.
Yes, my physical health, yes, but this past year it's been a lot on my mental health, right? And understanding my response to stress, right? Understanding my response
Hmm.
to things like trauma or just other stressors. And then you said maladaptive earlier, but yes, even in addressing those, there's a lot of maladaptive behavior that relearning how do I cope, right? Not
Yeah.
eliminating stress, but when stress arises, which it will, how do I figure it out and be happy with the way that I can address these things, right? Without
You done said a whole mouthful.
Yes, yes. Thank you to my
Seriously.
therapist who might or might not listen to the podcast because part but part of it is also that access, right? But prior to recently, I didn't have access to mental health care. And now that I do, it is a great privilege, but it's part of
Hmm.
my self-care as well. And so, I think as we wrap up for today, Cherie, one of the things that I recognize is the privilege that we do hold, right, in
Yeah.
this space now, about and our conversation in self-care, but also the power that we have as in the positions that we have and how we can influence and change the policies in our organization to promote self care, not just through policies, but actual dollars, right? To back up those
Yes.
policies, but also in the culture and how we model it. And that's my goal for this year also is to model it and say I'm doing what I hope others can do too. Is when I'm off, I'm off. And I'm taking the time off, and I'm trusting that there is some things in place that will help with tasks that I would do if I were off. All of these things, and if not, I'm making that space. Like all of these things, and really being challenged to take time to rest, and not thinking about during my rest time what pseudo work things can I do, but really take it off to do nothing but oil my scalp, eat some food that my mom makes, sit on the couch and do it quietly, and then
Yeah.
go out and meet some being community, get re-engaged, and then be ready to come back to work.
That is so true. I appreciate you lifting that up too, that it does require intentionality and being deliberate to really engage in it fully. I was recently at a baby shower and my
Mm.
aunt looked over at me and she said, "You are not at work right now." She caught me on my email.
Oh, auntie, you
I
see? We
know. I
appreciate that.
know. And I said, "You know what? You are absolutely right. I am
Mhm,
off right now." And
mhm,
I put it away. And it was one of those moments where I recognize that, being in a space right now with my family was a moment of self care. And yet I was letting these other things get in the way of that.
mhm.
That that actually could wait. They actually
Yeah,
could wait. It wasn't anything that couldn't wait. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? So letting the things that can wait, wait. And it is a constant reminder that my overall value is not attached to how many outputs I
yeah,
have.
yeah, yeah. And how do we now say, okay, if we're going to talk about values, right? That we can now say, okay, we actually value self care. And we want the same way that we value other things, if what it takes is, hey, let's measure it. Or let's, we don't want to be too restrictive and
Now
things
it
like
sounds
that.
like
But
you
so
talking to my therapist. She's like, write it down.
that's right. But I mean, and I say this right from both as an individual, that accountability, but also as an organization for us as leaders. What are we doing? What are we seeing? How do we know that what we intend is actually happening, and we're not just, talking about it, you and I in this podcast, right?
Right, but being about it.
Being about it, right? And so that is our homework, right? We have
Yes,
included it in strategic plan. We have policies about it. We have dollars behind it. Um, and we're saying it out loud now for accountability, right? For others to hear and say we are about it, right? And then circle back. Maybe, who knows, end of this year, we can revisit and say, how did we do as individuals? And also, how did we do as leaders of an organization? Were we about it, or did we end up just talking about it?
yeah, I appreciate that because when we talk about community, our organization is a community,
Yeah, completely.
and we create the culture of that community. And this is one of those areas in which, if we say this, there can be tangible evidence of whether or not we're actually engaging.
Yeah, that feels right. That feels like the right thing to do, is
Yes.
to say that and
Yes.
say, okay, let's actually talk about how it's working out. And there'll be hiccups in the road, right? Nothing is perfect, but our intentions have to match, our practice. Um,
Absolutely.
and it and our intentions have to have the impact that we hope that they have.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Well, I appreciate you
thank
having
you.
this conversation today
Thank you. I
because
appreciate you
even,
too.
for all of you listening right now, this is a part of my self care. being in this space with all of you, sharing with all of you is a huge part of my self-care. Gives me
Mm.
lots of joy and lots of fulfillment.
Oh, I'm glad you said that. But I feel like it's a roundabout way of telling me, Merkeb, we have to stay consistent on these podcasts because they're
Oh,
part of
well,
my self care.
it is a part of my self-care, but you know I'm more direct than that.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you. We plan to come with a podcast every 2 weeks. We would love to hear from you. Please connect with us. We are at mcedsv.org. You are able to share your thoughts about this podcast, things you'd like to hear, things that you think are important for us to share. On the website, you'll also find information about how you can connect with our hotline. If you are a survivor experiencing harm or member of community that needs some resources, we're available 24/7, 365. It's confidential, anonymous, and it's 855 Voices 4, and for both texting and calling. And there's a link through our website if you'd like to chat, or if you use TTY to communicate. So until a couple of weeks from now, we hope that you all commit to engaging in self care for yourselves, um, in thinking about how you can support others in engaging in self care and doing it genuinely, right? And from your soul and truthfully and honestly. And if you don't get to engage with it, then hopefully you have some time to think about what is a plan that I have for myself, um, to care for myself and love myself just because, not for a prize, not for a reward, but just because you deserve it. All right. Well, I don't know, Cherie. I Do you have some goodbye words?
I said goodbye. Yes, goodbye.
Okay. Okay, I
Thank
didn't
you.
hear
I
you. Thank you.
appreciate everyone. Yes. I said that's exactly enough. Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon,
Bye-bye.
everybody.